All right. Calling to order this meeting of the Board of Directors of the Montara Water and Sanitary District. Today's June 5th, 2014. At 7:35. Could we have a roll call, please?
Director Slater-Carter.
Present.
Director Harvey.
Here.
Director Boyd.
Here.
Dr. Wilson is not here yet. Director Huber.
Here.
And I understand that Director Wilson will be just a few minutes. Let's start with the President's statement. I don't have a lot on this foggy evening, other than I'm just really glad that it's still light outside and it's not prematurely dark. We do have a good bit of fog, and it's always nice when it's hot over the hill. But yesterday was the primary election, and I'd like to congratulate our friends at Granada Sanitary. The passage of Measure G was a real victory for local control and for special districts. And I know they worked very hard over many years to lay the groundwork for it and explore the options. And we look forward to their reorganization as a community services district. And they have been and continue to be a terrific working partner with us in a number of things, especially at the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side. Do we have any oral comments for anything for anything not on the agenda?
I will make one. Tomorrow is the 70th anniversary of D-Day, and it's an amazing piece of American history, and I know I'm planning on calling the folks I know who have survived World War II and saying thank you to them. They were an amazing, every single soldier in that war on the American and British and Allied side was a true hero, and I know we all owe a great debt of thanks to every single one of those men and women. So thank you very much. It's a big day.
Okay. Consent agenda. Does anyone have anything they'd like to pull for discussion?
Yeah, there are minutes on the Finance Committee, and I don't have any problem with the content, but I was there, but I found the format to be somewhat confusing, and so I'd be happy to help you, but it was hard for me to, you start, say on page 1, Director Huber had questions about the following items, and then it's hard to tell whether the text that follows the bold is his concern or the response.
Okay.
So I think it's important to clarify that.
Sure.
So I don't want to pull it other than just to mention on the SAM, the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast Side Flow Report, Granada has raised an issue that the percentages seem to be returning to the problematic pattern, the distribution between how much is coming into the plant. Normally has been something close to 50% Half Moon Bay, 30% Granada, and 20 to 22% for Montara. And this past month, it showed 44% for Half Moon Bay and 32.5% for Granada, 23.2% for us. A couple of years ago, we had some difficulty with some of the metering, and Granada is concerned and has asked that we take a closer look at are we experiencing some problem in the metering, which is indeed what had happened last time. So they're kind of raising the early flag on this. So I just want to draw your attention to that.
And we'll report more about that on the SAM meeting report. We'll talk more about that.
If we don't have anything to pull for discussion, can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Catherine and Jim moving to approve the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries 4-0. Old business, item 1, review and possible action concerning Sewer Authority Mid-Coast Side budget.
Okay, so we presented the budget at the last meeting with the new SAM manager, Robert Hopkins. And we're presenting the exact same budget. This time, we're asking for the same budgets. Those are 3 in total. That is the collections budget, we have the general budget, and then we have, for the first time that I can recall, a capitalized maintenance project. And so we're asking for the approval of all 3 budgets. There is, however, one significant change that I need to point out that occurred since the last time. When we presented the budget, we presented it as SAM recommends, or as SAM states it in the budget, and that is as Montara's share for the capitalized maintenance budget being $99,000. So this is on flow-based. So that would be the flow percentage of whatever, 19% I believe, I think it is, of $500,000. However, a significant amount of that capitalized maintenance budget, off the $500,000, I believe it's $140,000, are actually coming from SAM reserves, according to SAM board direction. So the SAM budget should actually only ask for a collection of $360,000, I believe it was, $360,000 of the member agency. So essentially it comes out to $63,360,000 for this district's share instead of the $99,000 that are stated in the SAM budget. So we want to point out that the SAM budget says something different than what they are actually planning on doing. However, it's favorable to us. It's over $30,000 reduction in contribution to the SAM capitalized maintenance budget. So the recommendation for tonight is to adopt 2 resolutions. One is the resolution of the Montara Water and Sanitary District approving and adopting Sewer Authority Mid-Coast Side budget version V 2.0 for collection contract services for the next fiscal year. And the next resolution that we ask to adopt is the resolution of the Montara Water and Sanitary District consenting to approval by Sewer Authority Mid-Coast Side of its general budget version V 2.0 and its capitalized maintenance budget version V 1.0 for fiscal year 2014-15.
Do we have any comment from members of the public? I don't see any sheets. Directors, comments or questions? Clemens, I know that after our last meeting, you and I discussed this a bit, and you were going to spend some time with Rob to clarify. I take it from your report that you've explored the areas of interest and that you've found everything satisfactory?
Yes, so essentially on one question, I received an answer yesterday, I believe, or today, which was, well, the first question was, essentially, are we supposed to come up with the $99,000 or only the $63,000? The answer was very clear and very fast. $63,000 is our contribution for the next fiscal year on the capitalized maintenance budget. The second question that I asked was the airbag relief valves. Has money been allocated, approved in prior fiscal years? And the answer was came today and was a clear no. So according to the research of the new SAM manager, who of course is relying on information of the interim manager, that is not the case. That has not been the case. So a large portion, $100,000, around $100,000, is for the replacement of the rest of the failing airbag relief valves. So I believe the confusion could be because there was already I think there was a small number replaced in prior year,
Mhm.
So that came back to you today, Clemens?
within the last 2 days.
Oh, okay.
The most important thing to me is that that work actually gets completed, so I'm glad that he's
Yes.
ready to do that. If we don't have any more questions, can we have a motion? Or-
I
or Bill?
think we should wait till Dwight gets here. If he said he'd be about 15 minutes late, then he may have some issues to raise on this.
All right, let's table this one for the moment and move on to item 2, review and possible action concerning district budget and capital improvement programs.
Okay, so this, we presented the almost same budget on May 15th for board review. We received some suggestions that we now included into this new version. So we have now a draft version that's called 6/1/2014. The changes are essentially editorial changes, mainly. We are talking about addition of page numbers. We're talking about actually a large addition of an executive summary that essentially points out the highlights of the budget. And also a review of the current water and sewer reserves, and that's where I want to start, but let's list further. The main highlights are a water rate increase of 5%. So we're asking essentially to raise the water rates to the Prop 218 limits. That's how I should state it. That's probably more correct. That comes out to around 5%. Then we're also suggesting a sewer service charge increase of 3%. That is essentially to cover the increased capital needs in the coming years. And we're going to go into what this actually means in a little bit. Then we're talking also about labor-related costs, which are expected to increase by 5%. Now, labor-related cost is essentially a second item that's wrapped into this. Historically, we've presented the budget. We also presented a new pay scale, pay range for the employees. And that is full-time employees that are listed on this pay scale. And so first, let me point out that, so we're asking the boards to approve a new pay scale that now includes a cost of living increase of 2.5% for full-time employees. And 2.5% is, we historically looked at the February to February cost of living index. And that shows a 2.5% increase, so that is why we came up with this. We presented it at the last board and understood that there was a consensus to move forward with this. So that's going to be one part of what we're asking the board, this item, to approve. Now, let's start with the budget, and let me point out a number of things. And I think it is best if we actually look now at the reserve section, which starts at, this is, interestingly enough,
Page
8 and 9, and unfortunately they don't have, so it stops at 7 and starts at 10, so it's the 2 pages that don't have page numbers on. So we have essentially, we calculated the water reserves for the reserves for the water side, and it essentially We have set aside $246,000, what we call the operating reserve. This is essentially just an earmarking of funds that are actually in a general checkings account. And we have currently $280,000 in the Wells Fargo checkings account. We're supposed to have a operating reserve of 2 times the operating budget. So now we're looking at a target reserve of $224,763. So essentially, the reserve that we currently have is sufficient for the operating reserve that we currently have is sufficient on the water side. On the sewer side, the operating reserve has a minimum target and a maximum target. The minimum target of $255,000, same as on the water side, is met. The maximum is a 10-month operating expenses, and what this says is essentially just we have an unequal cash flow on the sewer side. We're getting the property tax check, essentially the check for where we collect the sewer service charges. It's collected on the property tax bill. It's not a tax, but the sewer service charge is collected on the property tax bill through the Sanitary County tax collector. Those checks are received in April and December. So from April to December, we anticipate up to a 10-month time frame where we have very little income on the sewer side. And that's where we take a look at, during the time of the budget, do we have enough funds to cover the next 10 months? And yes, we do have enough, so that's the minimum target, the maximum target is $1.5 million. And we currently have $1.2 million in the maximum target reserve. So we will up that, and we have enough funds to do that. So we simply relabel the maximum target. Essentially, we have enough on the operating reserve. Capital reserve, let's go to pages 10 and 11. That's the pages that are now really interesting. Capital reserves on the water side are calculated through, we're also setting a minimum target and a maximum target. The minimum target is essentially we're looking at our capital improvement program and looking at the lowest year CIP, which is $234,000. And we're adding now an engineer's estimate that was prepared at the time of the preparation of the reserve policy of $750,000 that we need to spend any given year to maintain our facilities. So that gets us to a minimum target of around $1 million, $984,000. And the current capital reserve is $453,000. So we're essentially missing $500,000 for the minimum target. For the maximum target, that is also the engineer's estimate of $750,000, and we're looking now at the highest CIP year, which is this coming fiscal year. We have a huge project planned, a tank construction. So this CIP year shows $3.2 million in capital expenditures. So we have a maximum target of 3.946. It's not what we need to set aside. What we need to set aside is the minimum target. The maximum target just gives us an idea of how much funds should we actually set aside. So we can clearly say that on the water side, we essentially lack around $500,000 in capital reserves.
So Clemens, so this is, we're talking about water
Yes.
only here.
So Now, we have to come to a conclusion here, and the conclusion is that we're recommending to complete the Bartlewell's rate study that was started about a year ago. And we recommend to incorporate into this rate study an increase of the capital reserve to the minimum target level of around $1 million. So that's going to be our recommendation to the board, that we essentially start looking at what should our rates be. Now, this, I think, is a very good time to do this. We just announced that we would like to go to the Prop 218 limit on the water side with the rates. So this is the roughly 5% increase that gets us to the Prop 218 level. So we know that for the next fiscal year, if we want to raise rates, we have to go through a Prop 218 process. And that's traditionally the time when we want to know how many years do we want to consider including into the Prop 218 limit? How many years do we want to anticipate raising rates without having to go out to the Prop 218 limit? And what should the rate be? So we need a midterm outlook essentially on our finances and our and have our consultant come to conclusion on what the rates should be in the future.
Implement, how long will the Bartlewell's rate study take? What's the time frame for that?
Well, I mean, the time plan, we could start immediately on this. The time frame that is in my mind is that we want to have the results probably the latest by December, because going through Prop 218 is going to take a minimum of 3 months. So if we start with the rate study, let's say in September, we're pretty certain that we can present results in December, start the Prop 218 process thereafter, and have plenty of time to essentially set the new rates before the start of the next fiscal year 15-16. That's what we're talking about.
Okay.
Now, we don't have to, on the water side, we don't have to necessarily increase rates at the change of the fiscal year. We can do it at any time. And depending on the consultant's recommendation, we can raise rates before or after the fiscal year starts on the water side. Sewer side, since we depend on the tax collectors, or the tax collector depends on our information to be input in the system around the start of the fiscal year, and that's why we have our hands tied on the sewer side. We need to make decisions before the end of the fiscal year on the sewer side. We don't have to do that necessarily on the water side. But it's traditionally been a time where I think our customers, expect to see something like that. And that's where other agencies raise their rates, for example. So,
Well, as long as we're going to be doing that, I would like to be looking at a different style of rates, and that might be the water budget rate. I know North Coast County, one of the directors has done quite a bit of looking into it, and other districts have too. And I think this might be an appropriate time then to talk to the community and get more information out there, talk to Bartlewell's, see how that would affect the sewer rates to the individuals and various other, but I think, and that may not be the only one we want to look at. I know it appears that most of the water districts in the state, because of our drought, are going to a tiered rate structure with punitive rates at the top. But I'm not sure that is the best for this community, and I think we need to look at alternatives. And since we've got 6 months, I think this is a good time to do it.
I mean, a restructuring of the rates would add a significant amount of time to the rates study, and would require probably more than one discussion at the board level.
Yes,
So I'm suggesting that we bring this up at a next meeting as a board item.
I think that would be
To
good.
start the discussion and essentially get directions on how to approach the rate study.
That would be very good.
We have a rate committee, don't we?
We do.
It-
Really
it-
Refresh
But
my
isn't that
memory
also
just a little bit.
something that's appropriate for the strategic planning project?
That's definitely something that we can look at and discuss during the workshop.
Yeah.
But it deserves its own, I mean, this is something that we've gone through previously, and, you know, to wind up where we are, and Catherine's asking that we pick that up and take another look at it, and I believe it deserves, I mean, it's certainly something that should be brought up at the community meeting, but the particulars of how it would work, the economics of it, that's a special study item of its own.
Right.
Yes, exactly, so.
I don't think a lot of the public has even heard about a water budget-based rates.
You're probably right, Catherine.
And it takes quite a bit of explaining to get there. So
Yeah.
I think it is something, yeah, I clearly want the public involved. I want to hear their opinion on our rates. I will say I was just reading the it was sort of a Q&A, and it said, where is the most water in a residential household used? And somebody said, oh, the bathroom. And no, it's the yard. And I thought, well, that doesn't apply to Montara then. So we have a different kind of use pattern here, and I think we need to be looking at the fairest way to keep the water district running.
You know, maybe the thought might be is that there's almost two separate issues. One is the overall rate structure, and I mean, this district's got a challenge going forward because you've got a functional deficit before us, so that's going to have to be addressed just generically. Then the second issue is, do we want to tinker with the rate structure? Because with any rate structure discussion, there's losers and winners on that, and you know, some people make out better with one rate structure, and others make out better in another rate structure. So maybe we ought to separate those two apart, and Catherine, if you've got thoughts on how these things might work, it might be good to have exploratory discussions as to what models are out there.
I think that's a very good idea, because it should be fairly easy to determine for the financial consultant the amount of money that needs to be collected going forward. And you were saying the question, the second question is, how do we do this? And maybe this can actually be separated. And so I'm happy to invite Bartle Wells to a following meeting, one of our next meetings, and have a discussion that includes them on how to best conclude the rate study and also address essentially an assessment of our current rate structure.
So, let me just mention, just for background and for a suggestion for the coming work, previously we did a lot of work to look at the distribution of water usage throughout the district, and to break down and understand where the actual tiers of usage are, and everything had to be set so that once we had set the tiers in place, we were still revenue neutral. We weren't looking to do a fundraiser with this thing. We were looking to reallocate through the adding of the tiers, but still wind up with roughly the same amount of money coming in, just to provide the incentive pricing to get the usage down. So we've got a lot of background on that. If we could, for when we do bring this back to the board, if we could bring some, you know, a summary of some of that work. I think we've got things from board meetings from 2 years ago where we had that in some considerable detail. If we could pull out the really good pages from
That
that.
would have been
Was it 4 years ago?
3 or 4.
No, it seems like 2 years ago.
2010.
Wow.
Yeah, 2 years ago. So
As you get older, Scott, these years tend to blend.
I know that. I was hoping nobody would mention that.
Well, that's for me the chance to jump in real quick, Scott. The Prop 218 limit was set for 2 years. You're right on that. and here we are 4 years later, having
That's right.
extended the Prop 218 limit.
Right.
By 50%.
See, I knew I had
Yeah,
a basis
yeah,
for
yeah,
that.
2 years or
Yeah,
someplace.
yeah. All right. So we've got the district budget and capital improvement programs in front of us.
Well, that sounds like you're saying I'm done with nothing.
No, I just want
No.
to make sure we're staying on the topic. I think the suggestion of the diversion there was good and useful, but just want to bring us back to this.
Okay, so that's summarizing real quick. We have $500,000 deficit on the water side to bring the reserve up to the appropriate level. And I mean, let's not forget that the reserve policy was essentially created last year, and that was essentially the first attempt to address the need for capital reserve on the water side. And here we are essentially repeating what we said last year, and that is we need a rate study. On the sewer side, however, we have also a minimum target, and that's composed of the same components. So we have an engineer's estimate. That's actually significantly higher, around $1.2 million. That the engineer says we need to spend in any given year to simply keep up with so that our infrastructure stays in shape. And then we have a lowest CIP year of $790,000. That brings us to a minimum target of around $2 million. The maximum target has been calculated around $4 million. Now, interestingly enough, on the sewer capital reserves, we have currently $2.7 million in it, so we have enough funds set aside to cover the minimum target. Now, there's also one important aspect that we shouldn't forget. Essentially, this is just the labeling of our monies. We're saying we have $2.7 million sitting in LAIF. That's actually not true anymore, because we transferred in the meantime from our operations account a further $2 million. So this is reserves as of March 31st. So if we take a look at this right now, we have essentially, it's not labeled capital yet, but we have a significant higher amount sitting in the LAIF account. So we have around $4.7 million in LAIF at this time. I think that's important to note, because our next step, after just addressing the connection fee with one sentence, is to go and look at the capital needs on the sewer and water side. And one might say this is a lot of money for the sewer system, but when we take a look at our capital needs on the sewer side, I think this is going to be viewed differently. Okay, so connection fee reserve, what this essentially does is we're simply setting a connection fee reserve, and that we're setting it at the amount that we expect to collect in the given year, and we simply set it aside, label it as connection fee reserve. Those are restricted funds, and that's what we're expressing by labeling those as connection fee reserve. The board will receive a connection fee report in the near future, where we essentially then show how much money did we collect this current fiscal year, and how much money did we spend. So, and we're going to show that essentially we spent everything that's in the connection fee pot this year, meaning we spent more on capital improvements than we collected in connection fees. Okay, so if we're now looking at the capital improvement programs, I think that's probably the best approach. If we're now going to the sewer CIP, then we can see that we have actually, in our budget,
What page are you on?
we're on page 121.
That was a quick jump. Thank you.
So on page 121, under 1415, you can see pretty much in the center here, MWSD capital projects total, we show 821,000. Below that is an alternate additional project listed, and that is the Caprillo Highway Trunk and Express Sewer. And that is a project, a huge project, essentially replacing, as it says, it's the trunk line from, it's the gravity portion of the trunk line from the Canoff station to the Montara SAM pump station. And that is a project that's currently in 4 stages, so 4 different fiscal years we see expenditures. And those are significant. Those are over $2 million that we need to spend for this one project alone. And it's shown as an additional project. We're not quite certain if we are going to push this another further down the road, another fiscal year, or not. It depends on the Caltrans permits. We have some indication, we see some movement at the Caltrans level just this last week, so we might come back to the board and indeed ask for this money, but it's still so uncertain that this is only listed as an additional project. If we come back and ask for approval of this project, or the first phase of this project, then we will ask the board to fund it through reserves on the sewer side. So this project is currently excluded from the general budget, from the line item budget. So we only show annual total capital needs of $821,000 right now. Now on the water side, so essentially what I'm saying is we might have the need to access the capital reserve fund on the sewer side, depending on if we decide to undertake this large, the first phase of this large project this next fiscal year.
So can we just briefly, can you make a couple statements about the status of that pipe now? Is it leaking? Is it in good? Is it okay? Just a couple. Just a little brief.
Okay.
And
so,
how old is it?
So it's over 40 years old. I think it actually goes back to the formation of this district, to the 50s. Essentially, the treatment plant was located down here where the water tank is right now. There was an original first treatment plant, which was a primary treatment down on Montara Beach. And essentially, the formation of this district was the regulatory agencies telling the county that the primary treatment is not sufficient and that a secondary treatment plant needs to be constructed. So the trunk line goes back to the era of the formation of this district in the 50s. And what we're seeing is a sag, a belly, in the section between 15th and 16th Street. And to address that, we have to essentially increase the grade, which means that at 16th Street, it actually crosses the highway. So what we have to do is we have to lower the manhole on the east side of 16th Street. But to be able to do that, we will need to essentially replace the entire pipe that is underneath Highway 1 with different grading. So we have to lower the manhole on the west side as well. So it's a huge project, and yes, we've seen spills due to the sag in the pipe. So it's something that needs to be addressed. It's an old pipe. The later phases that are not as expensive are to replace then the sections that are further up towards Seacliff, essentially. So it's mainly a gravity line. Canal Pump Station is pumping up that short hill to 7th, Seacliff is, I think, would be 7th Street, I believe, right, Seacliff? Yes. I think that's where it starts gravitating down. So, that is that project.
Okay, thank you.
Clements, I believe that Tanya had given a priority to different projects, 1, 2, and 3. Is this on the high priority list?
No, this is a different engineer. This would be Newt Engineering. We're on the
Okay.
sewer side.
Okay.
And it should be actually, it should actually be right, the pages after that. So, you see it's a high priority,
Okay.
right? SSL risk, sag, leads, cracks. So it definitely is a high priority project. The hang-up right now is getting through Caltrans for the permitting. I mean, it's a major project that could require, traffic control, lane closures, et cetera. So it definitely requires some planning, and Caltrans is taking this very seriously and looking very closely how this could best be addressed from their end. And so we're working through this with them. Does that answer the question?
Oh, yeah.
If there are lane closures, let's make sure we at least put notices in the post offices and on our website, at least for our local public.
Right, I think that would require the night work as well.
Actually, the best way to do it is to put those little signs on the highways about a month in advance or so.
I'm certain Caltrans has their regulations
I'm sure they do.
and is making sure we follow them closely. So let's move over to the water side. And that is page 120. We're taking a look at the capital improvement program. And what we're seeing there is next fiscal year, a fairly minimal capital improvement program that is dominated by essentially the construction of the Alta Vista tank number 2. And that is listed currently at $2.7 million. And the reason for that is because that is what we have available in state revolving fund loan monies, and also funds that we can contribute from the operations budget. So this is not necessarily what this project is going to cost, but this is the number that balances the budget. So we have $2.7 million available to spend. Now, the bid opening was yesterday, and I announced that we would be able to let you know how the bidding proceeds. We don't have a responsible lowest bidder determined at this time, so I'm very hesitant making any announcements, but what I can tell you is it's not going to be $2.7 million. It is most likely higher. It's not something that we have to make a decision about right now in this budget process, but what I'm trying to say is that we might have actually the need for some some quick cash next fiscal year if we decide to move forward with the construction of the Alta Vista tank. If that is the case, then we will present, of course, some ways to essentially produce this cash. And that's also something that should be included, by the way, into the rate study. So I'm suggesting to leave this aside right now. Don't think we have to address it necessarily, but let me just say here that it's fairly obvious that we have a large capital reserve on the sewer side that we've been thinking about utilizing for that. We inquired about other possibilities with Garda Wells. It's going to be difficult to either modify the existing SRF loan, and that simply has to do with the debt service requirements that any bank or any lender is going to have to the district. And that's going to pose a significant delay at least, and maybe result in a significant rate increase if we would go out and borrow the money on either the open market or from a state institution like state, CDPH or IBank.
Clemens, how long will it take to build approximately, once we get work started?
Well, we hope that we can address this at a following board meeting, so either this month or next month, that we can present the board with some results.
Right, and how long will it take to, a rough guess?
6
to
months, a
actually
year?
build- to
6
build?
months.
6 months, okay.
So if everything goes smooth, this tank could go up this calendar year.
Okay.
Okay, so I think those are the main issues that I need to highlight. I mean, they're large dollar amounts, and there are some uncertainties on the capital spending for the next fiscal year. And we're essentially looking at reserves if we have to make decisions to move forward. So the budget is presented in a fashion that balances it, and that essentially either does not consider, like on the sewer side, the large additional ultimate project, or we will present a different solution for the financial needs on the water side if they should be higher than the $2.7 million. So I think that's probably it for the main points of my presentations, and maybe I should turn it now to the board of directors to ask questions.
I think you did a great job on this. It's a lot of work, and these are important steps. So thanks for you and the staff for doing all this. So we have two resolutions.
No, we have
Just
one. The
one resolution.
recommendation is to adopt one resolution, and it's the resolution of the Montara Water and Sanitary District approving budget for the fiscal year 14-15. What we're also asking is to authorize a cost of living increase of 2.5% for the full-time employees in positions that are listed on the salary range starting July 1st, 2014.
So it's two different motions? Is that what you're asking, or one motion for both?
We've traditionally had one motion for both, but
Okay.
certainly we can split it up if you guys want so.
Does our council have an opinion on whether we need to do two?
It's probably cleaner to do two different ones, but
We can do two. So if everyone's ready, can we have the first motion, please?
Sure, I'd like to move that. Go ahead.
I actually have a statement in regards to the budget. Okay, so first of all, the Montara Water System serves approximately 1,640 or to 50 different accounts. About 95% of them are residential connections. And of that, we're projecting water sales for 2014-15 of about 1.8 million. And we're also showing financing expenses of approximately 1.3. And then we also have projected property tax for water, which was for 2013-2014 of about $286,000. So that means that the revenue per domestic account is about a little over $1,000 a year, or about $93 a month. The financing cost for this for a domestic account is about $800 a year, or about $66 a month. And then you also have a property tax assessment that amounts to about $175 a year, or $15 a month, which means that when you add all of those up, that the average domestic connection costs about $2,000 a year, or about $175 a month, which is means that we have one of the highest rates in the state, and we also have a significant financial burden for people for water. The budget is based on last year's budget projection and not on actual performance from last year. This enables the general manager to understate revenues and overstate expenses in a number of important areas. For example, using the current budget and comparing it to the proposed budget, you get for years 2013-2014, a combined labor and benefits budget was $820,000, more or less. And for years 2014-2015, the combined labor benefits budget is proposed to be just about $900,000. So this is a difference of about $75,000, which is a 9% overall increase. 5% that is for employees, 2.5% for cost of living, and a modest 2.5% raise. And then there's also the additional cost of labor related to Pillar Ridge. But if you use the actual anticipated expenditure for years 2013-2014, that is $657,000 or $658,000. The difference there is about $237,000, which means that that's a 36% increase. So that basically, and then if you go on to an example of revenue as being understated, you go to a description of 4610 property tax receipts. For year 2013-2014, the budget was $450,000, and so that the budget proposed for the coming year is also $450,000, which really shows no increase in property tax receipts. But if you use the actual anticipated revenue for years 2013-2014, it comes to $570,000. And that's something that we can reasonably be expected given increased property values, so that basically it would show that you have $120,000 additional revenue. And although the strategy of comparing the proposed budget to last year's budget number is effective in funding capital improvement projects and making it easier to justify rate increases, it has three very important implications. One, it is misleading to the ratepayer in that it isn't transparent about what is really going on in the district. And two, it distorts the general manager's performance in managing the district, thus making it harder to objectively evaluate him. And three, finally, it undermines the efficient use of capital and promotes waste. The proposal to combine administrative labor and operations labor undermines transparency to ratepayers and makes it more difficult to evaluate general manager's performance. Other districts treat administrative labor and operational labor separately, so this is not some out of the mainstream concept. Then next, we have a fundamental obligation to our ratepayers to be constantly evaluating the performance of all outside vendors. There are a number of vendor expenses that appear to be off limits to financial review. legal, and engineering being two examples. Our recent change in accounting firms show the importance of closely scrutinizing the performance and costs of all outside vendors. The next one is that the potential acquisition of Pillar Ridge water system assets has major financial implications for the district. There are some financial projections included in the budget and the CIP, but no current formal financial analysis. Without it, we can't evaluate this transaction and its effect on the financial health of the district. I do feel that Clemens and Peter have both put in a lot of effort, time, and mental energy into this budget, and I do appreciate these efforts. That said, I feel that I simply can't overlook the deficiencies inherent in it, and I will be voting not to approve it as presented.
Do you have anything else, Bill?
Nope, that's it.
All right, I'm just going to start by saying I find your statement repugnant. You are impugning and imputing and implying things that, frankly, you've been present in this boardroom now for quite some time and have failed to raise these issues in any material way, although since taking your seat on this board, you've actually had an obligation to participate in these matters. So casting these aspersions and broadsides at this point, I've got to say, frankly, I find it offensive. I think you fail to comprehend what the tax revenues are all about, but we can correct some of these misapprehensions later. Wow, I've never heard anything like that, and I'm surprised to hear these words coming out of your mouth. Saying that we're wasting money, that we're not being careful about how we're spending. Are you serious? Are you going to point to anything specific on this front?
I just did.
No.
Would you please
No,
send
you
me
read
that?
a litany of numbers, but you didn't point to any areas of waste in any tangible way, and yet you've got in front of you a complete budget. You've had in front of you every month the financials. You've had in front of you every month the checks that we're cutting. You have access to all of the invoices that lead to those checks being cut. The broadsides, you know, talk's cheap. Are these really your words?
Everyone.
You didn't raise any of these issues at the committee meeting.
Oh, yes, I did.
No, you didn't. I was there too.
It's,
I would appreciate it if you would send me what you wrote so I could go over it more carefully. I took some notes, but I would appreciate the whole statement,
You can send it to all the
since you
board
were
members.
reading it.
Oh, we'll send it to everybody.
I think for the benefit of the public, we should actually go through every single point that you raise and probably assess it right now. I think there's a number of grave errors in your statements, and it simply starts with the numbers.
Could we start by
Could-
taking a break while we print his statements? So
let's
we
please
can
do
have
that.
it?
I think this deserves some correction right now. If you'll work with staff to get this printed, we'll take a brief recess until we have copies for everyone here, including the audience.
I